Former Vice President Kamala Harris has a new memoir titled 107 Days. It offers a candid reflection on the 2024 presidential campaign, particularly after President Biden's withdrawal from the race. The book delves into Harris's brief tenure as the Democratic nominee and her perspectives on the events that led to the party's defeat. However, the release of Harris's memoir has elicited mixed reactions. Some view her reflections as a necessary critique of the party's decisions, while others perceive them as self-serving. The timing of the book's release, about a year and a half after the election, has also raised questions about its motivations and the potential impact on the Democratic Party's future. So, what do you think or make of all of this here, basically? Well, all I could say is that I really realized that there have been some mixed reactions in like the release of her book, but I do want to say, bring up one point here, that in May 2025, Biden, in a wide-ranging interview on ABC's The View, said he was not surprised that Harris's loss in the 2024 presidential election, but not because of her qualifications as a candidate, instead pointing to what he said was sexism and racism leveled against her. And they said, quote unquote, Biden said, quote unquote, "I was not surprised because I didn't think the vice president was the most qualified person to be president. I wasn't surprised because they went for the route of the sexist route, the whole route, basically." This is Biden's words, basically. And to be honest, I hear what Biden is saying, but I really think Kamala Harris was still a good candidate to become president of the United States here, and not the current guy that's running the country right now. I mean, obviously they just went in a direction where they want a male president to take over the world, but apparently we round up in the wrong direction where we got who back in the office again here and so forth. So it's really just something that I really don't think that should be, I mean, it's really tough to describe it in specifically, where I could see why Biden was not surprised, because they all want to vote for who, and I don't know why they saw Kamala Harris as not a good fit, when to me Kamala Harris was a good fit to be the next president of the United States and to make history for the first time ever in our nation's history, basically. But I'll tell you one other thing here. Let me give you the key insights of Kamala Harris's book, 107 Days. The critique of Biden's re-election decision. Harris characterizes the Democratic Party's decision to leave the question of Biden's 2024 re-election solely to him and First Lady Joe Biden as recklessness, where she argues that such a significant choice should not have been left to an individual's ego and ambition. And another thing to point out is that there's defense of Biden's competitiveness. Despite her criticisms, Harris defends Biden's abilities, stating that even at the time, at age 81 at the time, he was more knowledgeable, capable of exercising judgment and compassion than his opponent, who is now running the country right now, which is 47. I'm not saying his name, but giving the name DT is a bad name here. But she attributes to any lapses to fatigue and rather incapacity, I should say. Excuse me. Let me take a little sip of water for this. Delicious. Oh, yeah. But aside from that, also one point to mention is that the challenges with Biden's staff, where Harris expresses frustration with Biden's staff, accusing them of rarely defending her against Republican attacks and fueling negative narratives about her performance. she suggests that their actions undermine her efforts during the campaign, basically. So, you know, I really need to read this book to find out more about why all this is going down, basically, and it's like, and why Kamala Harris got defeated. And I hope by the time 2028 comes here, we will have a new president that will put us back in the right direction, and hopefully it'll not be the guy in the White House again, because obviously there's been speculation that he's trying to run for a third term, which I hope he won't do here. But if Harris wants to run for president again in 2028, she has my vote for sure. So that's basically it here, and basically, so let me see if I'm reading this correctly. Here's one thing I want to mention here. Even the stakes were too high, Harris writes in the book. This wasn't a choice that should have been left to an individual's ego and individual's ambition. It should have been more than a personal decision. Throughout the campaign and in its wake, Harris has avoided much criticism of the president, and she served beside and defended him amid questions about his mental acuity. And I think they're referring to President Biden at that time, basically. And in the book, Harris continued to defend Biden's ability to do the job and describes him in 2024, especially at the time of his debate debacle, as tired. And quote unquote, I'm going to read this quote here, on his worst day, he was more deeply knowledgeable, more capable of exercising judgment, and far more compassionate than you-know-who on his best. But at 81, Joe got tired. That's when his age showed in physical and verbal stumbles. This is what Kamala Harris writes. She also says, I don't think it's any surprise that the debate debacle happened right after 2 back-to-back trips to Europe and a flight to the West Coast for a Hollywood fundraiser. I don't believe it was incapacity. So, I don't know what could happen between Biden and Harris in the future on how well they get along here. I mean, I hope they are still get along well enough today here, but who knows what could happen later on into the future here. So